I Want to Jump Like Dee Dee, with me, Giles Sibbald, is the music podcast that does music a bit differently. I'm talking to some incredible musicians, DJs and producers about how they use an experimental mindset to fuel their own creativity, pursue new challenges, overcome fears, bounce back from mistakes. Okay, so I was thinking this might have been a bit of a deviation from what we've been doing so far, but then I thought about it a bit more, and there is definitely a music industry connection, firstly, and secondly, it's a really, really good story, and also we've got a really, really great guest as well. She started her working life in the music industry, starting her own fanzine and then writing for Dazed and Confused, NME, Time Out, doing artist bios, running various stints in music publicity for artists like Swans, Afghan Whigs. And over the last few years, she's become a speaker, coach, and author, and she's written 3 books. Her 2017 memoir is called Woman of Substances, in which she uses, sort of scientific research and theories, plus her own experiences to investigate the paths that, in particular, women take in and out of addiction. Her latest book, which is soon to be released in the UK, is a follow-up to that book and is called Everything Harder Than Everyone Else. So I'm really delighted to welcome Jenny Valentish to the show. Jenny, welcome.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I tell you what, my 21-year-old music publicist self in London would be thinking, finally, recognition, because at that age, my ego was huge and I felt that, that kind of intro should be following me around. So yes, finally, thank you.
You've got it then. You've got it.
Thanks.
So I first sort of became aware of you. I mean, only relatively recently, when there was an article in the Guardian. I think it was like towards the end of May, which was, I mean, and it was an extract from your book, which is about your kind of Muay Thai training and fighting, and it focused on your story. And it was only really then when I kind of followed you on Twitter and then read more into your bio about the book, that I realized that it was kind of much more than about you and your story. In fact, your story is only kind of like a albeit a very, very important part. It's only a kind of small part of the book.
Half a chapter, yeah. But it's, the media is always like, oh, we just want your personal story. And I'm thinking, yeah, sure, but it's not a great representation of the product that I'm putting out and spruiking. But okay. Yeah,
I mean, do you want to, for listeners and viewers, just maybe just sort of go through that sort of journey and how you arrived at going into this sort of subject for your book.
Yeah, so I had previously written an addiction memoir, Women of Substances, and there are a few things that came up in that because it was very sort of, I was using my own story as a case study with which to look at a bigger picture.
Yeah.
So I was looking at how, why people get dependent on drugs, the different pathways in, what their experiences are like, women in particular, and then what the treatment options are like and how they fare with those treatment options. But there was a few things that came up that I hadn't finished with yet, I felt like. And they were the notion of endurance, because I used to flog myself with this kind of bloody mindedness in a way. There was this kind of, how far can I push myself? I'm going to, it's 3 a.m, I'm going to light up another cigarette and I fancy I can almost hear my lungs make a singeing noise, that kind of weird kind of endurance. There was that. I wanted to explore that a bit more, why people push themselves and have that all or nothing and kind of toxic relationship with their body. But also, what was the other thing? I had it a second ago. It was, control.
Control.
I felt like people who didn't have much control over their bodies when they were young, maybe through abuse or things like that, then often turn to things like eating disorders and drug use when they're older. And it's almost like this fuck you method of control. Like, I've got control now, I'm in the driver's seat. So I wanted to explore those things more, but this time I was looking at certain kinds of athletes and performance artists and people who are into like flesh hook suspensions, and talking to them about, you know, why they felt they were doing the things they do and how they can endure where other people wouldn't. And often control did come up. You know, often they did have this really dispassionate relationship with their bodies, like it was doing amazing things for them.
Yeah.
Like they might be, you know, I interviewed people like bare knuckle boxers and deathmatch wrestlers and people who are top of their game, but at the same time, while their body, you know, now while they felt really powerful and strong, whereas perhaps they hadn't in their youth, they had this kind of odd dispassionate relationship with their body where it was like a mule to be driven, you know. But having said that, it's actually a really enjoyable, fun book, unlike the addiction one. Like I deliberately wrote it, you know, not pathologizing these people, but more like these are the kinds of people who used to get songs and poems written about in years of yore, you know.
I actually got through it all. I don't know how I did it. Actually, it was really great. I mean, listening to, you know, reading those stories of, you know, kind of like endurance athletes. You know, like as you say, you know, I think Sir James, the sort of BDSM performer, the porn stars, you know, all these sort of people that are sort of leading what I think sort of society sort of would perceive as, you know, kind of extreme sort of lives. And the thing that sort of came through for me was identity. You know, about you know sometimes you know kind of double identity, leading double lives, and I think that we generally, I think that there's a lot of that around. If you take me, for example, you know, I used to, you know, I kind of quit my corporate job a few years ago, and I felt that I, like, just with that I was leading a sort of double life, that I was working this job, but it wasn't really me. And I got out of it, and it was just like this kind of release. Is that fair? Does that sort of come across in, you know, in your, you know, when you were meeting the people in your book?
It was more that they, whatever their pursuit was, it was their obsession, and it was so pertinent to them that they don't tend to share it exactly. So with their nearest and dearest. So, you know, their relationships might break down because they are so committed to this thing they do, like ultra running, for instance, requires, you know, maybe if you're really doing it seriously, maybe a year of planning, all your money goes into it, you're training every day, and everyone else has got to fall into line and fuck off. So it's more this kind of sense of identity that is so singular, and that can be a problem. Like if you think of athletes, they have a very short-lived career, and so a lot of sports psychology now is focused on how can we get you transitioning out of that when the time comes. And so there's all these methods like broadening your identity, so you're not just your corporate self, or, you know, podcaster or footballer or whatever. You know, you've got to try and think of yourself as being more multifaceted than that. But it's tempting not to, because if we are very driven people, you totally relate to the thing that it is you love, and you're not interested in anything else. It's like a special interest, you know. You're just like in tunnel vision. I
mean, the you know, sort of reading about Charlie, who's the, you know, the endurance runner, you know,
Charlie Engel.
And there was one thing that sort of came across for me with that was made me think about how we interpret or define success or achievement differently. And I think that he was almost like, I don't understand how anybody can't be motivated to, you know, kind of achieve. But for somebody else, their definition of achievement might be something completely different, something that he would think, no, that's not for me.
Yeah, because he said balance is overrated, which I thought was
that's right.
You know, we seek balance in our lives, and he's like, well, that means you're not putting yourself wholeheartedly into the thing it is that you came to enjoy. But yeah, I mean, success is a weird one. Like in ultra running world, Charlie is a god, but most people wouldn't have heard of him. I don't know how he makes a living, actually. I didn't ask him that. So you know, for all I know, he's poor as a church mouse. But it's what's important to you, isn't it? And that's what you align to, and that's your own definition of success.
Absolutely, yeah, yeah. I mean, for you yourself, you know, sort of going back to how or thinking about, you know, how your mindset has or identity has kind of like developed or evolved over time. You know, from, you know, go back to, you know, let's say, you know, either when you were a kid or when you're, you know, sort of, you know, working in the industry, in the music industry to now. How's that sort of changed for you?
I've had quite a few identity crises, actually, because my identity was forged to alcohol and drugs, speed, really. And like I threw myself into that at puberty. So
yeah.
And then I was reading all the classic kind of, you know, your Hunter S. Thompsons and your Hemingways and your Bukowskis and your booze-sodden music journalists. And so I further kind of cemented that. And I was into heavy metal. That was all about drug use.
Yeah, yeah.
Like Grebo and grunge. And so I basically just completely intertwined myself with hard-bitten, you know, sleazy music journo chick. And so later, when I was 33, 34, I really desperately needed to stop drinking.
Yeah.
And a huge panic thing for me was, well, I don't know who I'll be. That was the most scary thing. Because I've made, you know, we all construct our identity, but maybe some of us more than others. And I had definitely constructed it. And I was thinking, I literally will be an amoeba. I'll be featureless. I don't know who I'll be. And it was a bit like that at first. I completely lost my sense of humor when I quit drinking, and I was just kind of in a bit of a limbo for a year and a half. When it starts to come back, of course it comes back. You know, you find out who you really are. But then I've had a few other identity crises, usually connected to things like writing a book, and then you throw yourself into whatever the topic is, and then it's finished, and you're like, floating in space.
What's happening? What am I going to be?
Yeah, a bit worrying, having that kind of shaky sense of self. But I think everyone else knows who I am. It's just sometimes you yourself are like, I've got no idea.
Yeah, no, I think that's true. I mean, I sort of like that that quote from Mandela, which is about returning to a place that is unchanged, to see when you do that, basically you can see how much you yourself have changed. You know, when you kind of, so I like when I kind of think back to how I was, you know, sort of 20 years ago, I kind of, I can now sort of see a kind of progression. And I think that's sort of perfectly normal that you do that. But yeah, I get you know, at various stages along the way, you have your own crutches that you rely on, and they almost like do become or form a strong part of your identity as you're going through your own evolution.
Yeah, and I bet some people who listen to this wouldn't get that at all. I think some people just have a really strong sense of who they are. But if you attach yourself to a project and that becomes related to your self-worth and reputation, then you're in sort of danger. So I kind of used the last chapter of this book, Everything Harder Than Everyone Else, to talk to people, to athletes and people like that, about how they get around that. So that us mortals can learn from that, you know?
Yeah. What, you know, over the course of you know, your well, so, you know, your trilogy of books, you know, what you know, what do you feel that you know, kind of attributes that has given you, you know, in terms of your you know, kind of investigations, you know, like curiosity, or for, you know, things like that, for example?
I mean, I'm always, whatever I do creatively, it's like kind of project managing my way out of a crisis. So it's something that's going on for me. I mean, the obvious one's the addiction one. I was exploiting the fact that I'm a journalist to answer questions that I'd had for 20 years, like biggest one being, what the fuck's wrong with you? I mean, what a privilege to be able to actually ask professionals like researchers and experts at different stripes, I didn't literally say, I'm the case study, tell me what's wrong with me, because that would just be incredibly arrogant. But I was able to have in the back of my mind questions that I'd always had. So yeah, I mean, a book's a fantastic long-term project. It's a loss-making exercise financially, but it's a fantastic opportunity for you to explore the things that are confusing you. And I love looking for patterns. I've got the sort of brain that is like, okay, let's look for connections here, not coincidences and things like that. I'm not into that kind of thing, but just trying to understand the world around me by spotting patterns and things. And that's kind of, to me, what a book is.
I mean, did you feel that you were sort of pushing yourself out of your comfort zone doing this?
Which one?
The latest book. By going and meeting sort of people who are, involved in, like I said at the start, kind of what society would perceive as being, sort of extreme pursuits.
No, definitely not, because I thought these are my kind of people.
Yeah.
I think I understand where they're coming from. I did think to myself, this is a great opportunity to have a bit of a go at whatever they're doing. In the name of immersion journalism, it's almost like just being a tourist and dipping your toe in people's worlds. But I thought, well, if I'm going to interview a BDSM dom, I might as well have a few sessions and then claim it back as a tax expense.
Yeah.
Not to. And just silly things, really, like my curiosity would get aroused as I was talking to people in the book. So I got choked unconscious by a black belt and tried testosterone and had I live streamed kickboxing fights. But it really, so I was using the book as a hall pass to do things which you could just do anyway, but it feels like a bit more legitimate if you say, I'm a journalist and I'm asking some questions about it.
And it's all part of the investigative journalism as well.
Yes.
So this is like immersive journalism. Tell us a little bit about that then.
Well, I mean, at one end of the scale, you've got things like Gonzo, I suppose, like Hunter S. Thompson. And then you've got the real embedded stuff, like, I wonder if I've got it here. No, I can't pronounce her surname, but Barbara Ehrenreich, I think it is, did things like, in her book, Nickel and Dimes, which I think was 2001, she spent a month at a time in minimum wage jobs in the States. And really try to live on that and discover how impossible and like how stacked against you everything is. It's a little bit hairy, this kind of journalism, because it could be a bit like, it could be seen as you're being a tourist, you get to pack up and go home. But at the same time, I really just love to get amongst it. And so I've done things like, I did a blog for a year. Called Hey Man, Now You're Really Living, back in 2011, because I was really depressed. I'd stopped drinking and I was like, who the fuck am I? And I went to a friend's dad's funeral and the eulogies were amazing. Like, I'd never met him actually, but they were saying things like, I know he used to be a keen yachtsman and then he couldn't do that anymore because of the cancer, so he took up violin, and then he couldn't do that, so he was doing chess, and then he was reading a quantum physics book on his deathbed. And it was just a kick up the arse I needed. I thought, I'll do this mission where I've got to do something every day for a year. Keep yourself accountable by doing a blog. And so it just means you put yourself out of your comfort zone and you meet people you never normally would meet. Like, I worked on train tracks and, I was riding horses. Sometimes it was boring stuff because you can't, I had to work as well. But the idea is to get outside your bubble and meet people you wouldn't normally, like, get outside of my alternative rock bubble.
I think that's right. I mean, I think that's you're right. That's one of the kind of most rewarding things you can do. I mean, give yourself different perspectives, different sort of experiences. But for a lot of people, and it can be, comfort zone is a sort of very unique and personal thing, isn't it? Can be one of the hardest things that you do, is to sort of push yourself, because you get into this, it's like, you get into this, okay, well, I'm in this bubble, take your, kind of alternative rock bubble. Okay, I'm doing okay in this, but then I just wonder at some stage, you know, but when it, you know, is there a sort of trigger that says, is this it? Do I need to do? I want to do something else.
Yeah, I mean, I imagine everyone has that at some point, if not at multiple points.
Yeah.
And I think those crisis points are great because they are the point where you need to just push. You know, whether it's something like somebody's left you, or you've been made redundant, or whatever it is, something's happened out of your control.
Yeah.
And you feel frustrated. That's a great time to think, right, I'm going to make some other dramatic changes at the same time.
Yeah.
When I got divorced for the first time, I thought, I'm going to move to the country. I've always wanted to move to the country, and you know, you got the wind at your heels.
Yeah.
It's like, you're not going to do this normally in day-to-day life. You're far too complacent. Everything's comfortable. So if something happens that's just, is this it, and something's out of your control, then that's when you should be.
Well, I think, I mean, one of your chapters towards the end is called Retirement and Reinvention. And you know, whilst you know, kind of like, you know, if we take an example of retirement, I mean, it can be, you know, the situation you just sort of described. You know, you sort of get divorced, and it's okay. Well, you know, I'm gonna make change. You know, and it could be that you, like you say, you know, you get made redundant, and there's an opportunity there to. And I think with, you know, with people living longer and working longer as well, that you know, there's it's almost like, well, am I going to, like, if I take like my dad, for example, you know, he, you know, was like pretty much 3-stage life. You know, you go do your education, you know, he sort of forced him, he off his own bat, he went and got a mechanical engineering qualification, but then stayed in the same job for like, God knows how many years, and then retired. And it was only actually when he retired that he started like doing a kind of French polishing business, because that was what he enjoyed. You know,
what he's always wanted to do.
Yeah, and I think now there are many more opportunities to do that, but you need to kind of push yourself to, you know, to make those sort of changes.
Yeah, so I do think, you know, those things that happen to us that we find awful at the time are a real gift if you can get into that mindset.
And you make the point about self-belief being important as well.
What, in the book?
Yeah, about, you know, kind of like sort of reinvention, you know, about having your own sort of self-belief to do that. You know, it kind of takes a bit of, I guess, sort of confidence to do it. Yeah,
but I think also the sort of the mindset that of people in the book, and me too, is one of being highly revved, and so that, I don't know if you've heard of the phrase cross addiction, but yeah, neuroscientists use it. It's when, say, if you were taking drugs, your reward system in your brain is highly activated. And if you abruptly quit, then you kind of, your brain's casting around for something else to throw itself into. So sometimes, for instance, the classic thing is like people go to AA or NA, and then they start like, you know, shagging everyone in the room because they're now like really into sex. So, you know, if you've had something taken away from you, like you've been made redundant or something, then you are casting around for that. And that's why I found that people who give up drugs, a lot of them will hurl themselves into something really extreme, like ultra running. And ultra running to me is like the ultimate in mad. I mean, it's a full-on pursuit. But there's a ton of memoirs written by people who gave up drugs and got into trail running, ultra running, and adventure racing.
It's interesting. Yeah, I mean, I think you just thinking again about the identity and sort of double lives. I think there was an interview or a you know, the story about one of the porn star, I can't remember her name, you know, about leaving the industry and basically then kind of leaving that behind, and it kind of struck me that you know, the sort of the tale that she was telling about going to the school, you know, to pick up a kid, and none of the other mums knew what her alter ego was or a former life.
It's so lonely,
you know, and it kind of like sort of made me think, particularly sort of in this world, that still the stigma that's attached, to people who she's had a sort of former life but doesn't feel that, for whatever reason, whether it's kind of like sort of society, to be able to freely talk about that.
Yeah, because when she was living in LA, in Silicon Valley, pretty much, all her peers were in porn. So while the rest of us would see her as being a real fringe dweller, well, not us, but the rest of society.
Yeah.
She wasn't there. She was completely accepted and among her own. And as soon as she tried to leave that, then she had massive trouble kind of assimilating. And it's the same with people like I interviewed, like deathmatch wrestlers. There was a guy I interviewed who had to retire, and he had a huge identity crisis. Like, who am I now if I'm not Crackerjack the Mad Bastard, which everyone has known me as for the last 20 years? Who the hell am I? And I don't have that outlet anymore to scream and shout and be the center of attention. Same with porn. So I found that actually there's this interesting Venn diagram of professions. So loads of people, particularly around the late 90s, early 2000s, loads of people from porn, when they quit for whatever reason, got into wrestling, and vice versa. If you think about it, they're both professions where you have an alter ego. You're very loud, you're body focused, you're a spectacle, you're the center of attention. So they were really compatible. Like there was
interesting, a
pornographer, Rob Black, who was a really controversial one. He had his company was called Extreme. He started his own wrestling company. He brought loads of porn stars over to it. And then he had wrestlers who started making porn as well. So it's just, I feel that there's a certain breed of people who do not belong in normal, polite society. So they have to just keep jumping from these quite extreme, all or nothing professions. Those are the people in the book.
Yeah. The other sort of element was kind of perseverance. And I think kind of like sort of perseverance is something that we need, like generally in our lives, we need a lot of perseverance, because it's like so fucking hard to get things done sometimes. You just need to kind of like okay, I need to be sort of dogged almost in some things. And I think again in the book, one thing was about kind of trauma brings perseverance into focus.
Yeah, that was a bodybuilder said that. Yeah. Yes, so not everyone in the book does have a traumatic childhood, but a lot of them did, because a lot of us do. So yes, so they were using that almost as grist for the mill. Like they realized that they could withstand more than a lot of people could, because they had when they were younger. But also there was a sense of, there's a sense of what Freud would call traumatic reenactment, where you're basically seeking out a similar situation to what you had when you were a kid, and so almost choosing something where it's a bit like self-harm. But another thing I found a lot of interviewees did was they were kind of pressure testing themselves, like can I still withstand emotional pain and hardships, and can my body withstand these things, because they'd experienced it in the past, and they kind of wanted to know that they could withstand it in the future. But the bodybuilders one was really interesting, because I interviewed 2 female bodybuilders, and at first I thought, oh fuck, they've both got the same backstory, and I didn't realize.
Right.
Yeah, they've both been sexually abused.
Yeah.
They both had really difficult relationships with their mums, felt very betrayed by their mums. But actually it's a really common story in bodybuilding, really common, and with men too. And I think the reason they're drawn to this pursuit, apart from the obvious thing, which is you now feel invincible and you're really big and strong. It's also a lifestyle which is totally regimented. Every second of your day is planned. Your meals are planned. They have this very comforting framework that surrounds every hour of their life, you know, from calculating macros. And yeah, so it brings relief from this kind of fear of not knowing what's going to happen next. So it makes a lot of sense.
That's really interesting. I almost, when I was employed, I had the reverse. So like my day-to-day work was totally regimented. Well, I had to know exactly what I was doing. You know, you have to be kind of like, I'm doing this at this time, blah blah blah, and all that kind of stuff. And then when I got out of it, well, you know, come to the weekend or whatever, my own kind of personal diary was just shit. I mean, I was awful. And it was like, I just as you were saying, then it was just like I just didn't want to do it. You know, I just needed an escape from that kind of day, you know, kind of Monday to Friday regimentation. I needed to get out of that and just be.
You didn't design it,
huh?
You didn't design it. They did. So
yeah.
Maybe if you had the choice of, you know, designing your own reality, then it would be different. But also, I think you have to go through that period of utter chaos.
Yeah.
In order to later appreciate rigidity. I mean, my lifestyle was absolute chaos, unplanned. And now that I do sports, I find I really love getting up at this hour, going to bed at that hour. I'm gonna count how many glasses of water I have, all this kind of stuff.
Yeah. Do you feel like you're really kind of thriving with that? With that sort of lifestyle now?
Yeah, because it's I find that I really love using my body and learning with my body instead of my mind. I was always an overthinker, and I'm learning things like Filipino stick fighting, arnis and pole, as well as the kickboxing. And it's like, fuck, I love, you know, the whole idea of moving your body in these foreign movements, when all my life I've just been hunched over a laptop or whatever it is, and taking speeds and modafinil to write. Yeah. And now it's like every waking hour I just want to be moving my body instead of sedating it.
Yeah. And do you sort of find that you know, your kind of body and mind are just working, you know, almost like together?
Yeah, instead of ignoring the body or being really cruel to it. Yeah. It's like, yeah, we're going to collaborate and see what weird shit we can do. Yeah, love it.
Wow. So the book is coming out. It's out in Australia now. It's coming out in the UK 1st of
July 1st.
July 1st. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, it's staggered. Then it's coming out in the States in September.
Yeah. And what sort of coming out? What's next? Have you thought that far ahead?
I'm going to make a fool of myself now because it's such a nascent idea. But I'm thinking of something. I just don't know if it's going to be possible. But I really am curious about why there aren't the same kind of sex services for women that there aren't for men. So, for instance, like just wandering into a massage parlor, you know, if you're in a city on business and just knowing that you're going to get a happy ending or something, anything really. I'm just wondering why the only options seem to be if you're part of a couple, or if you're paying through the nose, like for an escort, thousands and thousands of dollars and those kind of things. And what I'm wondering is it that we don't want it, or is it that we have just never been offered it? So that's kind of that you need a central inquiry. But I just don't know how far I could take it, because you've got to be really careful writing about sex work if you're not a sex worker. You know, it's just minefields. And so I like the idea, but I'm just not sure if it's a whole book even, you know? Yeah,
of how to sort of approach that.
Immersive journalism, I mean, it'd be great.
Yes.
But then I'd have to talk about it, which would be fine with you. But if it's on the radio and you've got 6 minutes and it's by some very kind of paternalistic radio host.
Yeah, that's. I mean, the chance for misinterpretation or message distortion is going to be incredibly high, isn't it? I mean, yes.
Worth it.
Actually, I'm actually sort of like, yeah, exactly, it'd be worth it. I mean, you mentioned like on that subject of you being careful about writing that, you know, because you're not a sex worker, but you know, talking about when you interviewed some of the others, that you know, how did you get over that you were, well, you were cautious about being perceived as a kind of outsider, you know, kind of like intruding into that world?
Well, I had two entry points really. One was I'm doing a sport. Two, okay, it's not to the same extent as you, but you know, I am an amateur fighter now, so that was a bit helpful. Rather than just being someone sitting in your ivory tower going, oh, what are you doing? You know. And then having written Women of Substances, I have put myself on the line and talks about, you know, addiction, and probably dug as deep in myself as I'm asking them to. So that's another kind of way of going, I will handle this well.
Yeah.
So, I mean, they weren't, the people I spoke to for the book, they're not necessarily like, I mean, there's, you know, somebody who's had a few Olympic gold medals, but generally I was looking for people, it didn't matter if they're dead famous, it was people who just are really into what they do and have an insight into it. And that's all that the reader needs. They just need to be interested. They don't need to know if somebody's won gold, you know.
Yeah. It's sort of having the interesting story, and you know, I guess the sort of the openness to, you know, either at the start or eventually to be able to tell that story.
Yeah, there was one person, a porn star I interviewed, and I felt a bit awkward because so she was really interesting because she's in these films where they're like the quite aggressive face fucking genre.
Yeah.
So they're quite demeaning towards the women, beyond British, but you know, actually sort of really misogynistic.
Yeah.
So I wanted to talk to her because she's also an MMA fighter. So on the one hand, she's receiving this kind of degrading treatment, and on the other hand, she's really aggressive. But she didn't have as much kind of personal insight as you would hope, really. So, you know, it was an interesting interview. But then afterwards, she saw me posting some kind of training video on Instagram, and she sent me a private message because she'd forgotten who I was, kind of going, have you even had a fight? And just being really kind of like trash talking me.
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah. And do you remember me? I interviewed you last week for the book. And she's like, oh, yeah, my bad. And she asked me if the book was out yet. And I thought, oh, fuck, you've no idea what a book is, really.
Yeah.
If you think a week later it's going to be out, then can you really give informed consent about this interview, which is super personal?
Yeah.
But for the most part, there are people who'd really given a lot of thought to this topic already.
That's again, that's a sort of interesting one. You know, kind of like opposites. You know, the opposite sort of experiences, and almost like the you know, again, the sort of the double identity. You know,
well, athletes and porn stars really have to compartmentalize their life, and compartmentalizing is almost like a sociopathic trait, but they have to do it.
Well, I guess also, like, you know, kind of like sports stars as well. I mean, if you think about their career, you know, when they're really, you know, whether it's they're an athlete, you know, kind of football player, tennis player, you know, they're at the top of the game for, I don't know, like say age 16 through to 30.
Yeah.
I mean, and again, given that we're living so much longer as well, that's such a short proportion of your life. And it's kind of like, you know, that age old thing. I mean, you know, kind of like football players sort of back in the day, the traditional thing is you give up playing football and you go and sort of, you know, buy a pub and kind of, you know, sort of drink it dry or whatever, you know. But but now it's kind of like, okay, what are you going to do for the next, you know, kind of 50 years after you
generally become like an ambassador, a coach, a tabloid headline.
Yeah. you know, it's kind of like, there was one example of a footballer. I think Louis Saha played for Man United, and he, I mean, basically sort of like created his, or sort of formed his own marketing company. You know, but using the knowledge that he had of the kind of like the football industry to, you know, to use it in a different way.
Yeah, I think people are a lot more savvy now. I mean,
Yeah.
as I said, sports psychology now, a lot of it's based towards helping you out of this transition period.
Yeah.
And that's something we can all learn from.
Yeah. But I guess for some other people, it's not that straightforward. What's gonna sort of come next?
I think it depends how much your ego is involved as well. I mean, if I think of the people who have made headlines over here, like ex-footballers and things, for getting into, you know, methamphetamine and drink driving offences and domestic violence and stuff, they were absolutely, you know, put on a pedestal in their career.
Yeah.
And at a very young age.
Yeah.
So it's like being a rock star, isn't it? I mean, you've never known anything else.
Yeah, absolutely.
How are you going to become anything but an arsehole? It's pretty difficult. So it's kind of, you know, some of the responsibility has to come to those around you, and the clubs and the management. You know, they need to be keeping you down to earth, don't they?
I mean, do you think that you know, sort of ego, or you know, sort of inflated egos, or, you know, kind of lack of empathy, let's say, or ability to see other people's perspectives is like a big kind of stifler for, you know, how we kind of progress as a sort of society? Because it seems that, you know, we're getting incredibly divided now as a society, and it's like, you know, if you have a political view and it's like one or the other, and you just cannot, people just do not see any other sort of points of view, and it seems that we're kind of like just losing that ability to see other perspectives.
But I think in some circumstances it's necessary, like to be a lead singer or an athlete.
Yeah. You
know, people expect to see confidence and a certain kind of behavior. They want to be entertained. So in those kind of categories, it's necessary. And there's a whole chapter about fighters in the book, and I was looking at the role of ego, and on the one hand, it's supposed to be trash talking if you're a UFC fighter, and you're supposed to be entertaining. But on the other hand, fighters are supposed to be humble and have heart, and you know, learn from their mistakes and be respect their opponent. It's like, you know, you're asking a lot. I found it really difficult because I took up fighting at the age of 43. After a career, you know, of independent decision making as a freelance journalist or an editor, and then, you know, being like a child and told what to do and shouted at and feeling like an idiot. It's like intolerable.
I remember that. That's a really good point, actually. I think a lot of people will, you know, kind of empathize with that sort of situation. It's like, okay, I've been, you know, almost like my own boss. I've been used to, you know, kind of making my own decisions, and, you know, even if you're employed, you kind of increase in seniority or whatever. It's like I kind of make decisions, and then suddenly, bang,
nothing. You're nothing. You're nobody. Nobody cares that you write for the Guardian in a fight gym.
Absolutely, yeah.
You get all these programs now, like fight gyms aim them at white collar workers. So they're called things like from pretender to contender, from wimp to warrior, you know, rookie to hero, and they're designed to give you the experience of having an amateur fight, but they take away all that humiliation kind of learning part of it. And they pander to you, like you pay a fair bit because it'll be a course, you're doing it with people who are newbies too, but they take away the being shouted at, and they take away your coach treating you like a fuckwit, and getting hurt and sparring. They take all that away. So it's like, where's the glory then?
What's the point, really? That's kind of like an integral part of what you're doing, why you would do it, isn't it? You know, that's the quality of it.
How can you experience the victory if you haven't like walked away from a sparring session trying not to cry a billion times before it.
Yeah. You put in a really good phrase in the book. Again, I think it's sort of towards the end. What dragon are you fighting?
Yeah, so people who get into combat sports in particular, sorry,
Yeah.
I keep just charging in.
No, absolutely. Carry on.
People who get into combat sports as adults, I would say, almost invariably have something to prove. It's different if your mum and dad got you into karate when you were 5 and you just eventually ended up in Muay Thai. It's different. But if you chose it as an adult, then it's because you want to test yourself. You felt very vulnerable. Other people have made you feel vulnerable. So I can't remember what the question was, but I think I've sort of got there.
It wasn't really a question. It was just I was just sort of saying about the phrase, what dragon are you fighting, that you wrote. I thought was really, kind of like sort of hit home.
Yeah.
Like, and not necessarily about, going into sort of extreme sports, but just sort of, makes you think yourself, okay, well, what am I fighting?
Yeah.
What have I got going on in my life that I am fighting against? And it might be that you don't know, but it may, but the phrase just made me think, myself, and I think I thought was great.
You can guarantee if you go to a fight gym and you're holding pads or you're sparring with people, I mean, you can't read them because we're all in the same kind of gear. Yeah. So you can't get a read on who they are or what they do for a living. So all you really know is that they're there for a very personal reason.
Yeah.
And yeah, my dragon, I was saying in the book, is shame. Like I've always felt like shame has followed me around. And I was saying, then this is crazy. Why take up a sport where you're literally putting yourself in shame's way? Like you're in your underwear practically in a ring in front of thousands of people.
Yeah.
Possibly going to get knocked out. Why didn't you just do Toastmasters? But I guess it's the ultimate test of the self, isn't it?
The test of that, whether you've actually overcome it. How do you feel like you are overcoming that feel of shame? Do you think you will never overcome?
Yeah, probably never. No, it's very deeply. It's one of those emotions that's very deeply ingrained. But you get more of a grip on it. I definitely like the massive high I had when I did my first amateur fight.
Yeah. And
feeling invincible wore off much quicker than I would have liked. Because at first it's like, you've been in a ring, like anything else should be easy now. And it's like, yeah, but I'm pretty scared to do it again. And I'll be scared to do it again after that. And I'll be scared to do it again after that.
So did you, after the first one, you felt, did you feel like an immediate kind of desire to get back in the ring, or was there? Yeah, in
the same way that when you get off a roller coaster, you're like, I'm gonna get back on.
Get back in again.
Yeah. Then like, but the more you leave it, the more doubts creep in. Like, especially the first time, like, it's great because my mission was literally to get in the ring and survive 3 rounds. But if you do it again and again and again, you've got to get better and better and better and be a serious threat, haven't you? So there's always going to be a new fear.
Yeah.
Like, oh God, what if they pair me with that person who literally chases you around the ring and knocks you out?
I mean, actually, you mentioned that fear as well was another kind of sort of topic that sort of came up. I mean, fear is an interesting one, isn't it? But that it's a kind of survival mechanism that we have.
Yeah,
a lot of stuff around, like overcome your fears and forget your fears and get over it and stuff like that. But you need an element of fear to for your own survival. It's your own kind of mechanism. But how do you like you say, you're kind of like, okay, so you're going to be pitted against some
animal,
brutal kind of fighter, and you think, shit, right, okay, what's your kind of mindset like for handling that?
Well, see, I did a bunch of friendly fights where the pressure wasn't really on so much, and then I did 1 amateur fight so far. So for that, my mindset was literally, I can just do it, get in the ring.
Yeah.
But as I was saying, you can't coast on that a second time. So this time it's more, I think the fear is greater. And also, I witnessed that the fight scene and the promoters and the bookers are actually, hopefully they don't see this, but it wasn't the friendliest kind of vibe, it was it was a real hierarchy. It was quite a dinosaur kind of industry.
Yeah,
people were very disrespectful to my trainer, I felt. There was a hierarchy backstage. It was really visible, and it was like my eyes were open to, wow, you thought fighting was the thing you were up against, but actually there's this whole other world of attitudes and mockery and
almost like a kind of institutionalized kind of prejudice system.
Yeah. So now there's that as well. There's the fear of public opinion.
Yeah.
That suddenly opened up. But I will do it again. It's just an interesting new whole world of fucking hell. Wow.
Yeah, I mean, that's aside from the kind of like the fighting itself being incredibly tough, you've also got that shit to deal with as well.
Yeah, like I said, it's a real kind of last bastion of dinosaur attitudes and people scratching each other's backs, and that kind of almost like, I don't think the music industry is so much like that anymore, but maybe like 20 years ago, what that would have been like.
Yeah.
It's who you know, and a few big motors got it all tied up. Well, I've really destroyed my career. I must be doing it on purpose. Self-sabotage.
It's always okay. We can kind of bleep all this out.
Big noters.
Yeah, if you want the full version, you got to sort of register for this one.
Yeah, OnlyFans.
So do you think that do you have a feeling of your own kind of sense of expectations being raised each time that you fight? It's like, well, that I expect to do better, and it's that does that kind of motivate you to sort of carry on?
Yeah, and there's the fear of, am I good enough? Have I got it in me? But that's why I think people get addicted to it.
Yeah.
And some of the people I know who fight don't come across as particularly fierce in their day-to-day life, but something in them and their history makes them need to keep testing this.
Yeah.
And I still do it, and I find that really fascinating.
I think, human behavior, and some of the biases that we have, and actually, I mean, talking about sort of biases, I think one of the sort of topics that sort of came up was this sort of instant versus delayed gratification as well, and how, and that's a kind of bias that we have as well, so I think all that sort of stuff and what kind of motivates us is, I think it's like sort of fascinating. I really do.
Yeah.
I love the book. I love what you've done and how you've kind of delved into the kind of the mindsets and what is trying to find out what's driving this sort of extreme endurance and sort of behavior.
And what I think was really good about it was that the people I spoke to for the book were just as intrigued.
Yeah.
If they weren't, it wouldn't have worked.
Yeah. And I was going to say that, I mean, that's a really good point, actually, that did you feel that there were, as you were getting to know them better and to, understand them better, and they were doing, the same for them, for you, was this kind of like, dawning, was the kind of like lights going on? It's like, okay, yeah, I hadn't thought about that.
Sometimes, yeah, but I think other times they think to themselves, this is insanity, what I'm doing.
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
Whether it's like the deathmatch wrestler who's literally, every time he goes into the ring, he's literally organized with his opponent beforehand. Right, well, cut me here, and then hit me with this cricket bat with Kai attached to it. I mean, I think they've asked themselves these questions before.
Yeah.
But maybe it's the first time that they've been able to sort of explore it in depth. and be added to this whole kind of book of insanity. But it's, you know, I find them to be people who are these kind of natural born leg jigglers who have just found really clever ways of channeling this total restlessness, and found cathartic ways of doing it. And I really appreciate that. So I keep getting asked by really boring interviewers, like, oh, you know, do you think it's harmful? And do you think they're looking for the problem in these people's pursuits and behaviors? And I think, well, no, like, I mean, who cares if they run themselves into the ground? This is the way that they found that works best for them.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And, you know, as long as they have the odd recovery day, get a good night's sleep here and there.
Yeah.
Judgment from me.
I mean, I think it's totally fascinating. I think everybody should read it, because I think it should let you see things from a different perspective. I kind of keep coming back to that. See things from a different perspective, because you know, it's very easy to sort of live in your own bubble and not appreciate some of these kind of like external factors that influence behavior. And actually, there's, you know, in what the extreme sort of behavior does is to help. I think the buzzer's going in the background, isn't it?
Yeah, what is that?
Yeah, it's the flat buzzer. I think the postman's arrived.
Oh, go and get it.
Yeah,
pretty exciting.
So, but I think that, you know, that kind of that we've all got that. You know, these people are doing things, you know, to an extreme.
Yeah.
But there's something that's kind of driving them, and those drivers, I think, are inherent in us all. We just perhaps don't recognize it.
Yeah, well, I mean, the path of least resistance, just to like plow for a packet of cigarettes or go to the pub and sink a bunch of pints. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but you know, I used to do that and think about people who went to the gym just doing reps and sets and think that was the ultimate in madness and what a waste of time. Well, I'm just sat there like with people I've been hanging out with for years but didn't know anything about. She just didn't have those kind of in-depth conversations with them. So we've all got our kind of forms of release.
Yeah.
But I tip my hat to these people who are like, they want to be an outlier while they're doing it. You know?
Yeah, totally.
I want to go down in flames.
Well, that's brilliant, Jenny. Thank you so much. Thanks so much for you. It's been really fascinating listening to you, and to you know, thanks for the book. You know, for to read the book. As I say, I think everybody should read that, because there's a part of everybody in it, I think. So you got the release on the 1st of July.
Manchester University Press.
So I think by the time this podcast comes out, it'll probably be out anyway. But so best of luck with the PR for it, and for the, you know, for the UK side of it.
Such a good interview. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the show, and I really hope that you enjoyed it and that you'll tune in for the next episode. In the meantime, it would be really awesome if you could rate and review the show, and also share it with any friends who you think might enjoy it.